I don't think there's a debate on this question about digitization or robo-advisory. I was reminded a couple of weeks ago when I was in Dubai talking about the same thing, that every day we're generating a surprising amount of data. The number that was thrown out was 25 quintillion bytes of data. So first thing I did was, how many zeros does quintillion have in it? And I was surprised that the answer is actually 18 zeros. So it's a billion bytes of data every day. It's difficult for us as human beings to be able to assimilate that, contextualize it, and synergize it. So clearly, we're going to need the help of machines. So, the days of Terminator and the cyborg, I think are here. So robo-advisory in its first form, I think everybody's experienced a little bit of it. Automation of repeatable tasks, do-it-yourself, online access, self-service. That was Robo-advisory 1, if you want to call it, where the machine was, your front end, and you were able to do the basic tasks and move on from there. I think in the Philippines, at least, I see a lot of leapfrog from there to a much more machine learning-based robo-advisory of the future, which is really robo-advisory 2, which is in the age of millennials. Here I'm reminded about one thing. Again, 5 years ago, if you asked in the world, what's the most ubiquitous thing that everybody uses? And it used to be, what? A toothbrush. Everybody had a toothbrush in the world, and there were 4 billion plus toothbrushes that were sold annually many times over. Today, the number of cell phones and mobile phones outnumbers the number of toothbrushes. Right? So what are we going to do? Obviously not use the cell phone to brush our teeth, but everything else, right? So here's the challenge. We're growing up in an age of digital natives. Everybody, like Mike said, doesn't want to use the voting device, but is on their phone. So what are we going to do with that in the wealth management space? We've got digital natives, they're always connected, and most importantly, they do two things. Their behaviors are one where they look at personalization. The holy grail of everything that's happened, when you go into Amazon, he says, welcome back, Sandeep. You bought this last time, so would you like to buy this time, which is something similar to what you bought previously, or the system over there is recognizing your previous habits and presenting back to you what they think your choices are. That's robo-advisory, or the cyborg behind trying to give that to you, and that's technology enabled. So in the age of the millennials, one of the points that our speakers earlier said was that how do we educate the clients to go from savers to investors? It's by this complete package that you can offer them, which is on their device, that takes account for their saving patterns, their spending patterns, their choices of spending patterns, and at every stage give them a hint or a nudge in the right direction to become investors. And that's where, if you look at it in the US, there were 3 or 4 robo-advisory or basically e-advisors that came up. Betterment was one of them, Wealthfront was another, Future Advisor was a third. Together, 10 such advisors have now got AUMs in excess of 100 billion. That's a lot even in that developed market, but the surprising fact is that it's made up of more than 25 to 30 million users or customers. So it's very small amounts that come into those AUMs, and that's really the challenge over here, similar to India, is how do you tackle a broad base that are going to be the HNIs of tomorrow and move on from there. The challenge in front of an institution is, I've got a traditional business, and that's what we're all here to talk about. Everybody talks about, we have RMs, relationship managers or bankers. Are they key to our business? Yes, they are, because what's the 3 things that you cannot eliminate from wealth management? Trust, transparency, and the client experience. That's a combination of a lot of things, both from the regulators and the products, and the transparency of the products, the transparency of the service, the trust factor that you get, and even the sites that came up in the US, they had over a million users, 80% of them felt that they needed to have some interaction with a human being. So it's not as if we've eliminated that interaction completely, and therefore we need to be able to do away with the relationship manager. They definitely coexist, but if they can do some of these things with technology-assisted solutions, that would be key. There's one word that I'd like to throw out to you, which is apart from robo-advisory, which is the leading edge of the future, which is what we're working on, is cognitive computing. Cognitive computing is, I think, the next robo-advisory version 2 or 3 that will come out, and that's the leapfrog stage for most of the banks and institutions over here that I think they can go towards. It's about the fact that you ingest a lot of data, you contextualize that data, the quintillion bytes, you contextualize it with reference to the clients, with reference to that unique individual, and provide it back to him in that manner. So again, the scope of robo-advisory is to allow all types of institutions to manage their client better. So whether you have a completely upstart e-advisor business or you have a traditional business, you've got to take the pieces of computing power that can be made available and apply them differently to that. The e-advisor will have different distribution channels or the ability to market his service differently. The traditional BDO, private bank type of institution, which is heavily reliant on customer interaction, on meetings, will want to equip their workforce much more effectively with a tool set that delivers what the e-advisor delivers in a do-it-yourself environment. So the RM needs to be well informed, and the advisor needs to be well informed, and the client needs to be able to get their information whenever they need it. So I think the transparency and the well-diversified piece is key. The other part is that robo-advisory implementation. Obviously, you've got business reasons to do it, and globally, all wealth managers have one challenge, which is there's always a pressure on the fees. The e-tailers or the e-advisors, similar to the e-tailers, are pushing pressures on prices. There's greater degree of transparency, so that negotiation factor comes bigger into play with your clients. So you've got to be able to manage that. So your business problem that you're looking at is, how do I optimize costs? How do I optimize my operating budgets? On the other side is, from a client perspective, is what can I use computing and cognitive computing and robo-advisory to help increase my returns to client through a better application or more suited product for that client. So that's the two different halves of what robo-advisory can do. And I think the key to robo-advisory working well is lots of data. So the first part on that is for all institutions to look at their technology systems. How quickly can I assimilate data? How can I feed it into these algorithms, these cognitive powers that come out, and then give back to the client in a much more meaningful way? The elements of data are quite unique, and some institutions don't trap them today, but are necessary. How many clicks you did to get through a transaction, what you switched off, what you switched on your devices is critical to understanding your persona. And the holy grail of robo-advisory and computing is the persona 1. All of you are familiar with models. These are models about whether he's aggressive, whether he's balanced, whether he's conservative. That used to be the traditional way. Now think about it, having 1 million models if you have 1 million customers. Each one is unique. That's not going to be possible if we follow the traditional way, and that's the robo-advisory or the cognitive computing way. We've done this across many clients in different ways, but the one thing that always comes across is, how do I assimilate the data and how do I keep it moving forward to allow me to deliver in an omni-channel manner, which is a critical part of this, which means that the RM and his advice is identical to what I see on my website. It needs to be the same. So the omni-channel part of it is that I can talk to an RM, I can ask him to initiate a transaction, but when I log into my website, I see that transaction and I can complete it with the questions that I want. So I can pick up and drop off on any channel. And that's going to be a key to delivering this in a successful manner, because I think robo-advisory, cognitive computing all go towards one thing, which is keeping the client experience enriched, keeping it within the parameters that the bank or the institution wants to offer, and differentiating it for different types of clients.